Hello and welcome to the Manufacturershub podcast. For the regular listeners, welcome back. If you're new here, thanks for tuning in to the podcast where we shine a spotlight on the people and the businesses driving UK manufacturing forward. Hello and welcome to the Manufacturershub podcast. Today I'm joined by Tom Chaldecott from Knox Thomas, a consultancy for kind of machinery safety, PUWER, CE, UKCA regulations. So you help organisations improve their safety and their regulations, or to work with regulations, shall I say, in the industry. So, Tom, can you first say hello and introduce yourself into kind of what your business does?
Yeah, no, thanks, Rich. So we offer machinery safety consultancy, but we also couple that with general workplace health and safety as well. So particularly looking at industry, looking at the manufacturing sector, we can kind of often end up jumping in kind of at two different points. It might be that kind of general health and safety needs a bit of attention, and then one of the items that kind of gets revealed from the health and safety audit, say, is that their machinery compliance and their safeguarding around kind of machinery is lacking. So then we have the expertise internally to go in and kind of support with that, to conduct audits and then provide guidance on safeguarding and mitigations that need to be put in place to kind of resolve those hazards. But we also get involved in kind of general health and safety too. So that could be anything from general risk assessments. We get involved in traffic management systems. Yeah, kind of the works.
Not as if like health and safety, if you're doing like a health and safety kind of test you, if you're like an employee and someone's fallen over and that, do you get in that kind of aspect as well?
Yeah, so getting involved with accident investigations. We've been writing policies recently for a food manufacturer on what they do about recording accidents, how they navigate that, and things like their fire evacuation policy. So it's a real broad range of stuff. But the only specific item in there is, we're within kind of industry, manufacturing, production. That's the space that we operate in.
It's obviously, we work with a lot of manufacturers and we're trying to obviously promote as many people as we can within UK manufacturing. But I think kind of the safety side of it and meeting regulations, it normally gets quite overlooked. I say it's normally the last thing I think people kind of turn to, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's entirely true. I mean, there was a company we were chatting with yesterday. They'd just been acquired by like a VC, a venture capital fund. They'd had obviously loads of audits done, and you want to do your due diligence when you buy a business. And they spent a lot of time apparently looking at kind of finances and revenue structures and the like, but they'd completely overlooked health and safety. Now, this is a company that we'd done work with kind of prior to their being bought out, but they then saw our work and was like, okay, we need to roll this across the entire site. This is a significant gap in terms of our compliance. Like, what do we do about this? And we need an audit and then kind of implementation and all the rest of it as well. So, absolutely. And the other people that we spend a lot of time talking with are health and safety managers who often have moved from one business to another, trying to unpack kind of the state of play. So there's a guy that I visited yesterday, been in his new health and safety manager role for about 5 months, and he was just unpicking problems and just kind of discovering that there is no pure assessments. There's none of this. Where's that? And often those conversations, they'll just be like, Tom, as you come around, can you just, like, anything you observe, if you can just tell me, that'd be really helpful, and I can just add that to the bottom of my kind of investigations list at a later date. So yeah, entirely true. And often I say to particularly health and safety managers, it's one of the hardest jobs in a company. Like, if you're doing a good job and you're helping to reduce risk, you are frustrating either people above you or people below you. And you have to be doing that. So it's a really interesting one. I'm glad I'm not a health and safety manager, but I totally want to help the health and safety managers do their job well. Yeah.
It's a hard one. See, I come from an industry where I say building automation, kind of automated machines as well. So seeing a lot of these kind of health and safety aspects implemented into the machine design. So whether it's a light garden or whatever it is, or it's sometimes you've got to think ahead, haven't you? You always got to think ahead of what someone might be able to do, what an operator might be able to do on that machine, and that's where you've got to then implement that, or just be very careful of how something's programmed or how something's, let's say, especially when it comes to the controls or the electrical equipment as well, is how it works.
No, it's entirely true. And often, we get asked, do you need to see the machine running, or is it kind of in a stationary, unmanned state, which is better? Now, there's a whole lot of things we can look at when it's not running, but often you wander around and you're like, why is that plastic box down there upside down? And it turns out that they use that to stand on, to then stand on this hydraulic line over here to reach this thing. And you're just like, there's no way the manufacturer of this machinery would have foreseen this. So yeah, you're totally like, how are they going to use it? And then the other question is is like the factory that it's in, how skilled are the operators and what's the culture like? Because if the culture is kind of, I don't know, say automotive, like you've got a really high level of skill with all of your operators. And typically they're not going to do anything stupid. You can kind of trust them of that. Whereas like some food production places, 50% of the people there might not speak English. And you've got to design your equipment accordingly. And like, it's probably also going to be that their facilities are really crowded. So trying to navigate between machinery is going to be really difficult. And it's just an entirely different environment. I often say to a lot of clients, a lot of customers, that effectively what we're ultimately trying to do is keep people safe. And there's in fact two ways to do that. Okay. So one way to do that is guard your machine to the hilt so that no one can get to it, so that it's almost unusable. Okay. Or you just don't employ the moron who's potentially going to hurt himself. But both of those things are really difficult to do. So you could go down I don't want to employ a moron, but like say you're the company owner, you're the CEO. Well, okay, the next person you employ has to understand that they can't employ the moron. And then their next person down has to understand the same thing. And it goes down 7 or 8 stages. And then you do it with the moron on the shop floor who does put his arm in that conveyor. What do you do?
I've found, so working, you're saying about automotive and the skill level as well, but it depends on, I've been to many factories where they try actively to try and probably get the lowest, I think, wage as possible. So they're constantly going through different agencies to get staff. So then these staff, there's a very high turnaround in these staff. They don't want to be there. They don't want to run the machines. They try any way they can to break it, to stop having to work. So sometimes it's looking at how can you make sure these aren't going to get broken and they're going to stay safe. And yeah, these people will do anything not to kind of want to work sometimes.
Well, I've never thought about that necessarily as a cost-saving exercise, but it's a really interesting one in that, okay, you could pay these guys less, but you're going to have to care more about like the chances of them having an accident. And which one is worth it? And then, you've got loads of other things in the mix there as well. But yeah, I'm going to try and remember that one. That's helpful.
It's the place I've been, you always think why don't you just pay that little bit extra and you start getting people that actually want to be there and do the job. You could probably put not half the amount of safety stuff. Obviously, the machines are still going to be safe, but where some of these, say, machines I've seen, they've got stupid amount of sensors on them just to keep them safe. But actually, it's all around trying to working around so someone like purposely can't help themselves.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, an example, and I've been reviewing some work for a PUWER assessment this morning. One of the standards 13857 stipulates that if you have an opening in a guard, so a slot opening that is greater than 20 millimeters, okay, 20 millimeters, like, you're talking an inch, the reach distance to the next hazard has to be greater than 850 millimeters. My question in there is like, whose arm is like less than 20 millimeters and 850 long? This is insane.
It's quite funny. I went on the same machine in the past, and the mesh fence. The customer came in and said that the mesh is too big. It's like 40 mil squares, 50 mil squares. It needs to be 25. I mean, this machine was going to France. So I was like, who can stick their arm in there at 40 or 50 mil? But I mean, maybe the French could fit a baguette down there. I don't know.
It's a great point. Yeah, and I mean, it's a conversation that's regularly had, and often the question is, when you're thinking about safety, there's a spectrum. And it's all relative. And as we've touched on, like it depends on the competency levels of your staff. But are you after safety? And you're going to accept that there's a balance between kind of sticking to the letter of this particular standard. And I want this thing to be operable. I want to keep production high. Or do you go down the assurance route where like you simply want assurance that you're compliant with every letter of the law, irrespective of kind of who it is that's potentially operating it. And it's a really, it's a minefield. No one can come out and say, oh, you have to do it this way, or you have to do it this way. It's dependent on so many things. So I'm skeptical of anyone who's like, turns up, and I've heard this from people as well, like, oh, we've had consultants previously who have said we have to turn the machine off. I'm like, that's a very gray area, because ultimately risk is all about commercial risk. Like, and what's the business appetite for that commercial risk as well? So it's not simple. We're not in a crack.
Sometimes you say about, I know you speak before about being like a box ticking exercise as well. You don't want to be a box ticking exercise. It has to be relayed to the staff, and people want to be able to abide by those as well. So what do you kind of suggest around saying box ticking and actually doing it because of the need of doing it?
I mean, that's the £1 million question, I think. And this is a difficulty that I have. So a lot of health and safety is a box ticking exercise. Now, we live in a society and a culture where people typically don't want to take responsibility. So if you can go, the law says this, I've created my risk assessment. It's not my problem that people don't do the thing in exactly the same way that I've written on the risk assessment. I've put up my A2 HSE mandatory laminated sign on the wall. I've done all these things. And effectively that is it's a shifting of responsibility. So, but it might be that if you do all those things, you've got competent staff levels, say, and those staff are suddenly distracted by all this box ticking stuff, your productivity levels just plummet. I mean, so I would be of the ilk of saying, let's be pragmatic about these things. Let's take personal responsibility. Let's allow individuals to think, is this a risk that I'm willing to kind of put myself in front of? How am I going to approach these things? The danger is, who have you got in your team though? Because if you've got people who are competent and able to say, this is safe, I can approach this way, great. But if you don't, and you've got a room full of people who might put their arm in that sharp thing, you need a lot of paperwork to defend yourself.
Let's say on top of that is, so if they're not looking at just the box ticking side, is what else should they kind of focus on within their teams to kind of help them?
I think the biggest thing is culture. But the difficulty there is you can't go, you need this, you need this, you need this, you need this. So one of the dangers, and you see this. So we were at a factory a couple of weeks ago, and they make bakery products. Okay, and there's new piece of machinery had gone in, and there was a section of this machine that wasn't designed to have guarding, so it didn't have any guarding around it, and there was a weighted bar that was moving some of the product, and there was this conveyor that was kind of traversing in and out, and this weighted bar that would move the product, and it wasn't guarded, and some people were kind of looking at this and kind of looking at settings and things, and someone had their arm in there, and I'm looking at it like, there's a shearing hazard just to your right there. That bar's probably pretty heavy. If that came down your arm, that'd be uncomfortable. And like, there's like 3-4 guys stood around this thing. And I'm just like, I wouldn't put my arm in that. But because of this mindset of everything is guarded all the time, it means that you become sterile to hazards that are actually there. So, but you can't create a piece of legislation that trains people or kind of exposes people to those degrees of risk. But if you've got, one of my arguments is potentially you want less guarding. Now, I can't advocate this when I'm going around kind of doing an assessment against PUWER or CE marking or anything like that. But if it was my legislation and I could, I would have a greater say, I'd have less guarding. Because what it's gone and done is it's made us sterile to the actual hazards that exist within these machines. And it means that you're potentially going to get hazards because everybody assumes that everything is safe. It's a bit like when you put warning signs on everything. I'm always nervous whenever I see loads of warning signs, because what are you warning me from? Because I can't see it. There's something here that like I might accidentally put my arm in, so I'm going to keep my arms to myself. But it's probably just an arse covering exercise by the manufacturer. But like the consequences of that overabundance of signage, you don't know what that is.
I totally get it, especially about kind of being kind of sterile to the environments as well. So where I've come from, like a a machine kind of building background is a case of when you're actually building these machines, you're not really kind of adhering to all of the safety. You're still building the systems, aren't you? So even near the end of it, before it's even been completed and commissioned, I'll stick my hand in there, I'll stick my hand in there, I'll do this, I'll do that. And then obviously when it gets to the other side, actually right now you're in someone else's plant as well, and you're still commissioning. It's a case of, right, we better kind of, make sure we abide by all the kind of safety rules.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we looked at some Korean machinery about 12 months ago. And this is the first time I've kind of worked with large industrial Korean machinery. Turns out it's very similar to Chinese machinery. And it was being commissioned by the Korean guys at the time. And one of these things was a very big laser cutter. And he was stood on the bed of this laser cutter. And it's probably like, I don't know, maybe 4 meters wide by 10 meters long. And he was like, had his hand over the gantry, operating the control station whilst being stood on the bed at the cutter head. And you're just like, if you're doing that now, like, what can the operators do? And how do you think the operators, as you train them, are going to use it? Like, this is crazy. Yeah.
Do you always have there's like a 2-person rule as well, so you can near enough eliminate any kind of safety with 2 people, can't you?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Obviously there's a cost element there. Yeah.
In case of like shutting people inside machines as well, can't you? You can shut someone inside a machine and run it if there's 2 people there, can't you? Obviously, but it's trying to obviously work around, just say, I mean, it depends on the type of machine and the process, but a lot of machines are kind of built to be operated by 1 person, so 1 person can't defeat the safety on their own.
Yes. It is interesting how, you've got the guarding that is designed to not be bypassed in any way whatsoever. But as you stipulate, you could stand inside a guarded area, and you could have someone run it from outside. Now, there are mitigations in place, like you need to be able to see inside that area. You might need kind of warning on startup so that people can kind of get out. So there are mitigations in there, but they are a lot more dependent on the behavior of people rather than kind of the design of the machine so much. Obviously, the machine design is important there and it is covered, but
this is where you have say lockout, tag out as well, don't you?
Yeah, certainly for maintenance. Yeah.
So you're talking about obviously these machines, laser cutters, and the industry. Do you deal much with say robotics and industrial robots, Cobots?
Yeah. So quite recently we did a bit of testing on a Cobot. And this is a really interesting industry. So the assumption is that, and I think this is a lot from the sales guys, the assumption is that the machines are safe. That's how they're marketed. That's how they're sold. They've got load detection. They've got force detection built into them. And they're sold or marketed sometimes as safety, like innate safety functions or features. One of the things that you're meant to do when you install any robot, particularly one that you're going to potentially be engaging with, is look for some pressure testing. So is there a chance you're going to put your hand underneath where the end effector is, I don't know, torquing a bolt or picking up a component? There might be. Your risk assessment says yes. And therefore, what's the control measure you're going to put in place to prevent someone's hand getting crushed? Well, you're probably going to put a force limit into the program, into the Cobot software. But you put a force limit in, the robot obviously doesn't know exactly what the end effector looks like because it's not an integrated part necessarily. So you probably want to do some verification testing. So we've got some equipment. We went out and did this verification testing, and I don't want to name the robot manufacturer or the Cobot manufacturer. Anyway, they are like well known within industry. And we were doing this load testing, and you've got a standard called 15066, which outlines the maximum kind of acceptable loads and forces if a robot was to hit various parts of your body. And in the robot, we'd set 50 newtons as kind of the safe load. And one of these tests that we did with the end effector, the loading was 168 newtons. And you're just like, this is significantly greater than what you were anticipating, than what the software is stipulating. But nobody's doing this verification testing. They're all making the assumption that the robot was, I suppose, calibrated by the OEM and that it's being sold as safe. Now, there's a lot of tests out there that I would argue that you potentially don't need to do for the sake of safety. Take pat testing for one. I was in an airport the other day. They don't ask you to pat test the stuff that you plug in to the plane. Like, pat testing, I would argue, is a waste of time. Is there frayed cable? Does it work? But this kind of testing, like if you're getting loads that are 3 times greater and this thing is interacting with a person, it could knock them down, it could crush their hand. This totally needs doing. But the question is then, like, when you end up at the client site and you're like, this is 3 times greater than what you thought it was going to be, they then have to come up with a solution, and it's not a small one, to actually mitigate and reduce that force, that pressure. Yeah, it's significant. And the interesting thing here is there's not many people in the cobot space or any of the integrators kind of in that world that are actually talking about this, which genuinely concerns me, because I think we want to see more cobots in use. And I think we're going to slowly see that. And it's a good use of the technology. But if we're not being safe and we're not thinking about safety kind of at this early stage in the game, what you're going to get is you're going to have an accident. The HSE are going to pick up on that, and they're suddenly going to clamp down on the industry and potentially just make it a really sticky industry to work in and make it difficult to implement, install, and operate cobots. And we don't want to be there.
So one thing I saw it, I'm sure, last year, and it was a case of with cobots. They had obviously their operating load they can normally take, and they had a download which could suddenly then make them load or move around an extra 5 kilos on each of these robots just in a download. So how does that work? I mean, like you're saying, with a load case and how they're significantly higher, and it's all in a little software download. I mean, it's still taking the same weight through all the knuckles and the joints.
Yeah. No. I mean, that is one of the questions. Like you move to a larger cobot as well, and the force is required just to move the arms, the speed at which they kind of, if you're looking at the standards, the speed at which they need to stop is greater than that they can. It's almost, some of the use cases that they've been installed for are just not appropriate. Like, it just doesn't work. Yeah, I mean, I would point my finger to some of the sales guys, particularly this idea that your kids can program these things and that they're inherently safe. It's just not true. I think that points back to, we often want a quick fix. We often think that there's an easier solution if we buy a different product. I mean, there rarely is. Like, we need to engage people who know what they're doing, who are using the technology well and have the knowledge, and it's just going to be hard work to come to a good solution. Kind of the end. There's no shortcuts.
Exactly.
But we don't like that.
Is it this where I think, obviously, I saw last year, say November time, I've been more informed recently, but last year, this is where they changed. So the cobots, rather than obviously calling them cobots, they call them small industrial robots, and now they're under different classes of the safety, whereas a class 1 or a class 2. So not every single one, like you're saying, not every single one is safe. It's now done on the class. Yeah.
I mean, and I believe the standard at the moment really is more geared. And when we talk about collaborative, it's more this is the zone that the robot can function in where it is kind of fully safeguarded. And then this is the zone where it's interacting with the individual, whether that's kind of taking a part away from an end effector or passing something back. Like that, you can totally do it. Like, it works really well, but it's not as simple as I've bought a safe robot. Like, that's not a thing.
I mean, there's plenty of products out there. So someone shows up onto, you see that there's this safety mat you can stand on. As soon as you stand on that mat, or there's the scanners. Obviously, if you're somewhere within the robot, it then goes to like half speed or something.
Yeah. And I mean, they're really good products. Like, I mean, this particular case that we were looking at, I imagine if you had like one of those 3D safety scanners kind of mounted above the cobot, kind of looking down, if anyone was to step into that area or to step a certain distance within reach of the robot and it stop and it slow down, I think that probably their current setup would probably work. But yeah, the cobot needs something else. It's not safe in isolation. Yeah.
Play and that's it. You're off and away. It's a total bigger story to that, isn't it? So you recently went to a carbon fiber factory, didn't you? So what did, without obviously giving away too much, is kind of what did that project involve?
What did that project involve? Oh, that is an interesting one, Richard. So they had an incident, and they their concern, and rightfully so, as an incident gets investigated, therefore you want to know what all the other things are that could potentially be hazards that get identified by people before they get identified. So that was our main involvement there. I mean, it was a relatively old plant, and as with all of these kind of environments, it's big, it's dirty. The equipment can be from the 60s. You end up observing things that are genuinely dangerous. I often think some of the environments that we wander into, we did some work with a large forging company not that long ago. Obviously, in the forging industry, everything is hot. Everything is like you can't put a warning sign on like hot surfaces when you're in a forge. Like, just don't touch anything. Like, I think often I say this to the guys, like, we're really privileged the places that we get to go. Like, people don't get to see this stuff. And I mean, this forge, it was a bit like kind of Sauron's lair in Lord of the Rings, just massive moving hot stuff. You know, you could feel the temperature of things. The floor would shake as like some of these presses and these forges, the hammers were dropping. It's incredible. I think it's just really exciting that we still have pockets of that within the UK. Now, obviously, some of that is leaving. I think very sadly, some of the climate change fear and the kind of the conversation that we see in that, particularly in education, has potentially put a lot of students or young people off engineering as a career path, because you wander into these places and they are filthy. They're dirty. They're consuming a lot of energy, and therefore they're kind of deemed bad for the environment. But we need to make things at the end of the day. You know, we need to make landing gear for aircraft, and it's a dirty process. So, we need to make the machines. You know, we chat internally quite often about no one man can make a pencil, because there's so much man time caught up in that. You know, you've got the company or the person who invented the particular router that put the grooves in the side of the pencil, or like turned the end of it, or that's a pretty long hole, you know, kind of 150 mil, I don't know, maybe just over a millimeter, maybe 2 mil. That's a long hole to keep straight. Like, there's a lot of knowledge in there, and there's a piece of technology that has done that. Now, without the infrastructure to do all those things, like we won't have laptops, we won't have microphones, we won't have like all these things we won't have. So like there's a dirty manufacturing somewhere in this process. Now, the danger is we end up kind of condemning that, which we really don't want to do.
Trying to show them as well what is out there. I mean, not everything is dirty. Not everything's dirty. I mean, I came from when I was kind of growing up and doing my apprenticeship before. Then I wanted to go into kind of motor vehicles, and then I was like, all right, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to get my hands dirty, changing brake discs and pads and things like that. Like, I'm going to go into engineering. It's where obviously like family went into and stuff. So I'm going into engineering. It's much cleaner. Teachers are saying that going to engineering, it's much cleaner and working on cars. So I went into the engineering, but there's so much kind of cleaner kind of routes they can go down as well. Just say automation, or if it's a lot of aerospace assembly is clean. Motorsports is kind of, it's a clean assembly. There's not always this dirty side.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's entirely true, but they all rely on something that is probably dirtier, you know, whether that is the component that's being manufactured, or it's the fact that energy is, you know, car manufacturers use a lot of energy. They have an awful lot of robots in there. Where does the energy come from? Like there's all these processes that we're dependent on. And we can't kind of offshore everything. It will not work.
So at the end of the day, we've got so many people here as well, and there's so many careers. Everyone wants to do different things. There's so many kind of engineers and so people within the supply chain. There's thousands of jobs. We need to kind of structure it. We need to bring back UK manufacturing and there's the supply chain just to keep going in these manufacturers.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Yeah.
So there's so much out there. There's so much that can be reshored, and I'm a positive believer that we can bring stuff back. So we're doing stuff obviously in the hub as well, where we're trying to help with RFQ and get more businesses at least being made aware of each other, so they can use each other rather than, I say, send stuff out. It's not always necessarily about the cheapest price. It's just about knowing who's actually out there that can do the job for you.
Yeah, and I think connecting those people, like I've heard it said previously, your your net worth is your network. So the number of people that you know is how do you start connecting these people? And not to say you're making money. It depends on your framework or the rest of it. I want to connect people because I want to help people. So one of our vision for the business is to be the go-to health and safety consultancy for the industry within the next 10 years. Now, that doesn't mean that I want people coming to us asking about EMC compliance, okay? But it does mean that I want people coming to us and being like, Tom, do you know anything about EMC compliance? And I can then go, oh, you need to speak with this guy over here. Like, I want to help make those connections.
Well, that's it as well. It's as long as they kind of know, they everyone want to come to you, won't they, as well? So it's a case of if they all come to you, you can help in some ways as well. They'll always remember you as, actually, I'll go back to Tom because he knew where to go for that.
Yeah, entirely. Yeah.
So some of these, I was going to say, is you said you worked in China and Korea on the machines and other places abroad, Ireland. Do you see much difference in how the machines are built and the safety compared to ones that are built in other countries?
I mean, yes. I made the brash statement not that long ago that all Chinese equipment was crap. Someone then corrected me. And the problem is that it's not all crap. Half of it is actually really good, and that's why we buy it. And then a really large segment of it is crap, and that's why it's really dangerous, because we bought it hoping that the thing is really good, and it just isn't. I mean, we were at a plant the other day, and they just bought a Chinese extruder line. I mean, you're looking at it just, this is dangerous. Like, I think the simplest thing here to do would be to just throw it away. Like, the cost of the kind of assessment work, the rectification, understanding it, like, and then have you even caught everything? Because the thing is so intricate, it's such a complex process, and you may even have saved money if you bought the thing from the UK, say, or Europe, and the quality of the product that it produces is potentially better. So I mean, totally. This isn't to say necessarily as well that like product from the UK or from the EU is necessarily safe and compliant. But I would significantly say that the majority of it is far safer, far more compliant than places like China, places like Korea. It turns out as well. But if you find something that is a good price and you've managed to be kind of on top of it enough with the supplier, the biggest thing here is just understanding what you're purchasing. So a lot of the people that I want to talk to, and I think they need kind of training and exposure, is the procurement department. But they're all, as you've just touched on though, they're always driven by price. So like, if they can't understand what a declaration of conformity looks like, or a good risk assessment, or a good set of design documentation, like, there's a risk there that you're just going to get something cheap and rubbish. And if you couple that, as we said earlier, with people who are not paid particularly well and they're not too fussed about doing a good job, there's risk everywhere.
So I think a lot of it does determine down to price as well, really. I mean, everyone, I'm always saying, obviously, British, there is good designs, good designers and products, say, in Britain. But then again, there is obviously elsewhere in the world as well. But it's a case of, down in this kind of perspective, really, is the sake of it's price driven, I think. And it's a case of you get what you pay for. That's what it is. If you're looking for that cheap price, why is it cheap? Is it the hours that gone into it? Is it the products that have gone into it? The overall product is cheap for a reason.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. I mean, the irony for us is often when we're looking at Chinese equipment, so we had something not that long ago, you're looking at Chinese equipment that somebody wants CE marking because they recognize that it should be CE marked if they're using it within their factory. Great. But you're just like, this is just a death trap. But there's so many things that are wrong with it that it's going to take me forever to write this report. But the conclusion is, throw it away. Now, sometimes I'm like, let's not do a CE marking report because there's so much wrong with it that it's pointless. Have a look at how much it's going to cost you to replace the machine, and then let's have a conversation afterwards. Because don't waste your money on a CE marking assessment when it would contribute to buying a new machine. And then the amount of rectification work you're going to have to pay for to then correct it, just don't bother. So, yeah, it's an interesting one.
That's the thing, especially when they say they're paying, obviously, all that paperwork for you guys as well. And if you've got to buy new products to make it safe, I mean, I've had a conversation before where they've worked on machines from overseas and they're using just like fake components. They look like they might be Siemens. They look like they might be Allen Bradley. They're fake and they're just not safe.
Yeah. I mean, we see it with things like safety relays quite often. There's sometimes the odd brand comes up and I'm like, I don't recognize that brand. I might just Google that a bit. Or like you look at the front of it and it looks like, I don't know, I'm not going to name anyone, a well-known safety relay manufacturer. And then you look on the side and you're like, hang on, the detail in here doesn't look quite right. Yeah, entirely. Like the risks, it's not worth it. It really isn't worth it. And like the struggle here is that so much stuff is price driven and the price totally has to be taken into consideration. But like the value of quality is just being neglected. And I think, you know, we've been chatting about kind of onshoring of manufacturing facilities and processes already. Like we're not putting appropriate value on the quality of product.
I think sometimes it's what I always say actually is a case of sometimes it's people are looking to save a penny, but then they're spending a pound. They're trying to save the money right at the start, but actually then they're spending all this money in extra compliance. They're spending all this money replacing components. They're spending all this money trying to keep this machine to the right, say, compliance and standards for the UK. Why don't you just spend the right money in the first place?
Yeah, no, I entirely agreed. Yeah. I mean, then but it is totally a mindset change, you know. So for example, the other day at home, we print various things with the kids. You know, they like doing coloring books and whatever else, and we'll print stuff. So I brought like an office printer because the HP printer that we paid like, I don't know, 30 quid for or something like that, it got to the point where we had to feed in every single A4 sheet on its own to get it to print. But the mindset changed to go, no, my time has some value to it, and it's worth me investing in this expensive or more expensive office printer so that I don't have to spend time kind of feeding in individual sheets. There's value in my time, and it's worth getting a good printer. Like that mindset is just so uncommon. It's so rare, and we need to encourage it. So I think the conundrum here is that we don't understand the value of people's time as well. You spend more money and potentially it frees you up to do something else. Like all money spent is an investment in something. I bought a robot lawnmower last year because I hate mowing the lawn. Okay. And you've got to wait for that time period where like it hasn't rained for a couple of days and the grass is kind of dry enough. And then you have to go and get the lawnmower out and it has to be sunny. And you have to kind of make time to do this thing. Or I think I spent, I don't know, 300 quid on this robot lawnmower and it just mows the lawn for me. And it has given me back, I don't know, 45 minutes of time a week. And I don't have to shove a lawnmower and like experience kind of back pain and the rest of it as I shove this thing around the garden. Like it's worth it. But often we're unable to go, it is a value for me to not do something. And that there's an investment here. Like it's a mindset change that is uncommon. And we need to get back.
So I think I'm going to invest in one of those actually, because I don't get a chance to do anything. I mean, if I could have like a robot car washer or something, I think I'll do that as well. Yeah. So yeah, I was going to ask, is there anything new for this year? Are you going to get into any other compliance or say ATEX or anything like that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think for us, one of the items that we want to target is Cobot load and force monitoring. I think it's an area that the industry could really do with being kind of taught potentially, but also a way to kind of think about the safety and enable people to verify, validate the systems that they've built. So that's the area that we certainly want to get into. And it looks like a really exciting year for that.
Thanks for obviously being on the podcast anyway, Tom. I say it's been a great conversation with you. There was a few questions I wanted to kind of ask in there about say the industry and what you do, but we've covered so many other topics instead. I think there have been so much more kind of flowing of a conversation, so that's been great there. Yeah, it's great to have you on and listen to more about what you do and your kind of perspective of the industry.
No, fantastic, Rich. Thank you very much.
Cheers, mate. I'll catch you soon. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation and want to hear more from UK Manufacturing, be sure to watch the podcast on the Hub or subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll be back soon with more stories. Until next time, Keep innovating, keep investing, and keep UK manufacturing driving forward.